become a problem, and how you separate those out, I think, is our responsibility as the adult society, trying to provide alternatives and restrict situations that induce harm. That would lead to my presentation. The endogenous cannabinoid system, I would like that to be a common parlance. I would like every person in this community to understand this. And in that regard, I was approached by a fellow yesterday. There was an international cannabinoid CB2 conference in Banff. And there's a chance that we can bring the second annual to Mendocino. And here you have a group of people from all over the world coming together for 3 days to do nothing but talk about one of the cannabinoid receptors. The CB2 receptor is found in the T cells, the B cells, the lymph nodes, spleen, thymus, and one of its primary functions is in modulating the immune system. And if you know anyone that uses cannabis and benefits from it, there's probably a 60–70% chance that they have an inflammatory or an autoimmune disorder. They've got rheumatoid, they've got osteo, they've got post-traumatic arthritis that turn into an arthritis. And the 5 different anti-inflammatory compounds in cannabis, which don't go on to block the enzyme that protects the stomach, that leads to the GI bleeding of the ibuprofen and more commonly used problems for arthritis. Cannabis is wonderful because there's been 34 million years of research put into the development of this particular plant, and it interfaces very well with the physiology in the human being. And it goes back to this picture here. This is the receptor, what they call the serpentine receptor. It's embedded in the membrane of every cell, and I say every cell with some degree of anticipation. At this point, we have CB1 in the brain, CB2 in the immune system. A new receptor called GP55 is going to be the 3rd cannabinoid receptor. GP12 is going to be the 12th or the 4th receptor. And it looks like there's likely to be a protein receptor in the membranes of a tissue type that's trying to coordinate and regulate its activity. But going back historically so we can get a sense of the origins of the system, there's an organism called archaea, which is a very primitive single-cell organism. We had to create a whole kingdom because this organism is so unique. It's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's a very, very, very simple organism that's billions of years old. But in the membrane of archaea is this protein that is in the cells of our immune system. It's in the cells of our brain, it's in the cells of our intestinal system. It regulates glucose metabolism in our body. This is an epiphany of conservation. It was such an effective design that 4 billion years later, this exact same serpentine protein is involved in the regulation of cellular function. This here, I don't know if you can read it, it lists the cell types where the CB2 receptor is found. It's that structure that we just looked at previously. We know every amino acid that goes into this protein, and there's a slide coming up that was a computer modeling of the function of this particular receptor and how it, in fact, the active ingredients move through the lipid medium of the cell membrane and attach inside the cell membrane to this receptor, and it can direct the cell to go through an apoptotic response, which is where it can tell the cell to lyse the membrane around the nucleus and destroy the cell. And this is useful because 1 million times a day a cell goes precancerous. Body is highly competent at dealing with that change. And what the cannabinoids do is they identify that cell. CB2 receptors in some situations are not present in some normal tissue types, but when the cell becomes abnormal, this receptor is produced, installed in the membrane, and brings the attention of the immune system, which can range from additional assistance to destruction if it's deemed that that cell is a precancerous cell. So all this bears to why it would be so exciting to bring this conference to Mendocino, because we are in a position to help undo some of the damage that's been done to this plant and these 66 different cannabinoids that are found in this plant that are unique in that, I mean, what are the chances that you're going to produce a large molecule that binds to the receptors in our body and can be involved in regulation of glucose metabolism, pain reception, seizure potentials? I mean, it's absolutely huge. And if you if you have some extra time, you can go to ICRS, ICRS, go to the 2008 Symposium page, and download the abstracts. It's a 30 meg PDF, so be on a high-speed line. It's about 1.25 inch book. There's 140 or 50 original research papers in there. This one came out in June of '08. The one in '07 is equally impressive. And what you'll find in there is that the rest of the world is amazed at how the body's endogenous cannabinoid system interfaces with these plant cannabinoids. And what the bottom line is, the body produces these endogenous cannabinoids to help modulate function. They're a feedback molecule which can either increase or decrease activity, but with the intent of restoring optimal function. And it's an excellent design that here's a plant that supplements our endogenous cannabinoids, and we've produced 5 or 6 of these chemicals that bind to this receptor that help restore normal function. And what they do is they come in and facilitate that optimal regulation. Further, there's a class of compounds called terpenes, which they bind to that CB2 receptor and change how tightly it attaches to the cannabinoid. And when I say cannabinoid, I should probably call it an icosanoid. That way we can remove that whole word cannabis, which causes anxiety in a lot of folks and outright rejection. So if we change the language, it'd be easier for all of us to understand our physiology better, and whether or not we decide to indulge in the euphoric aspect or the dysphoric aspect. There is a whole bunch about this plant that none of us should be rejecting. The green leaf of this plant has the ability to provide the benefit of these cannabinoids without the euphoric stimulation. You can benefit over time. You can interface with the arthritic conditions. You can reduce the autoimmune disorders which affect every organ in the body. And so there are ways that people have taught me in this county that this plant can be used in a very positive way without the euphoric aspect. Now, like you said, if you're releasing dopamine and that makes you feel good, there's going to be an issue there that is a personal issue when you're an adult, and if it leads to problems in adolescence, that's where we need parenting and education. But if you tell these kids that this is bad and they get a hold of this science, they'll look at you like a liar and they'll never believe you again. The science is overwhelming. If you look at the people doing the research, this is Bristol Myers Squibb, this is Merck, this is Abbott Laboratories. These people know this is the future of medicine, and they're just trying to figure out how to make synthetic molecules that they can patent and sell back to us at a considerable profit. But you're going to have a hard time improving upon this plant because it's an incredibly synergistic organism. Like I said, you've got terpenes that bind to this protein to determine how tightly it attaches to the cannabinoid, say CBD. It determines whether that signal is going to be short or long. So you have multiple factors when you ingest the fresh leaf or inhale or vaporize the plant that can not only has a positive impact or has an impact, but it can determine the duration of impact.
2-minute warning, Dr. Courtney.
How many?
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank
Good.
you.
We'll move quickly then. This right here was the video of this woman. They spent millions of dollars making a computer model that showed how this works at a molecular level. Here's a quick overview, and you notice that the cannabinoid receptor on the right-hand side has that allosteric site. That's where the terpenes attach. The active ingredient acts at the active site. That leads to all the internal stimulation that affects a lot. CBD is one of the cannabinoids in this plant that is not psychoactive, but is anxiolytic. It's the only antispasmodic. It is an antipsychotic. It's a very amazing molecule that at 500 milligrams a day in a 190-pound adult, if that is analogous to a mouse strain, prevents the formation of diabetes in this mouse strain. 60% of the time, you prevent the formation of a genetically driven model if you give them 5 milligrams per kilogram a day. The ramifications, if it's analogous in the human, given that 14 million Americans go blind a year, is phenomenal. The loss of limbs, the loss of kidneys, the loss of eyes. And this is all done by a non-psychoactive molecule in this plant that's also found in the leaf, which really, in my mind, is the single most important item in your diet on a daily basis after water because of how it modulates the immune system in a positive fashion. This shows that arachidonic acid, this could be one of the most important things that a mother who's pregnant takes on a regular basis. Arachidonic acid is a precursor molecule that leads to not only all the prostaglandins, but all the endogenous cannabinoids, and it affects how the nerve tract moves through the brain. In order for the brain, like say we got something going on in the rear, in the optical section, you want to bring it forward, this nerve tract has to burrow through the brain, and at the cone of that fascicle or bundle, the cannabinoids are involved in directing it. If you give someone a CB1 blocker, and what does Western medicine do? The first drug approved in England is Rimonabant. It's a CB1 blocker. It interferes with that neuronal guidance system, and the nerves splay and fracture, and you no longer have strong connections. So all to say that, you know, if Western medicine gets involved, it can be a bit of a problem. And if you learn one thing from this talk today, be very careful of anyone that is messing with the endogenous cannabinoid system from a pharmaceutical approach, but at least entertain that the green leaf is a non-psychoactive dietary supplement of huge proportions for the prevention of a wide range of conditions, all of which can be detailed in that Icarus textbook that came out this last June, and if that's not good enough, go back to 2007 and 06, and they're all worth reading.
Dr. Courtney, never in all my life have I heard such a display. I think it's pretty clear that there are people trying to figure out what's really going on with marijuana. Had we had the good fortune to have a certification expert here tonight, we would have found out why it costs so much and why drug companies are not too interested in paying the $600 million or so to certify one or two of the cannabinoids and then not have any control over the product when they're done. But that didn't happen, so I'm just interjecting that. So thank you very much from our medical panel. Now, folks, if you have any questions that you might be wanting to ask them later, be sure and write them down on the little blue card, and then we'll ask them at the end of the night. So thank you again for the medical panel, and now we're going to move on to the schools and youth area. We shall see. In the survey, there was a question in the addiction area that said marijuana is easy to, quote, take it or leave it, end quote, in social situations. Most people agreed with that, 67% in the survey. And I think that's of interest to the panel that's here because the social situations and the peer pressures to indulge or not indulge are something that are very active in the youthful arena. So who we have here sitting before you, closest to me, is Carol Serrallo, and she is, well, I don't know what she is, but I do know where she works.
I can say.
Yes, she works for the Mendocino County Office of Education, and she will expand on what it is that she does and who she is in her remarks. And in the center we have Dr. Karen Wandry, who is involved in or runs something called the Mendocino County Youth Project, and you'll learn more about that. She's written a paper on the subject of marijuana in our county recently, and we'll hear a little more about that. And then we have Jill Timken, who is the AODP Adolescent Treatment Programs Supervisor. Yes, thank you very much. I'd like to start with Carol and then go to Jill and wrap up with Karen.
Oh. Can we do 1, 2, 3?
Oh, you can see now, this is clearly not going to be a patriarchal thing here. The ladies are in charge.
Yeah.
You go for
We
it.
have our own system.
I'm Carol Serrallo. I work for Mendocino County Office of Education. I'm the Prevention Education Coordinator, so it's my job to work with all of the school districts. Can you hear me? Okay. In the county, in planning prevention programming. What a hard act to follow, Dr. Courtney. Holy Toledo. I did not bring a PowerPoint, but I kept thinking about, I am a licensed substance abuse counselor, and I kept thinking during the last presentations of the docs and of Ralph, thank you, Ralph, about a workshop that I went to in Humboldt County, and Dr. Daryl Inaba, who is the founder of the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic in San Francisco, was speaking, and someone asked him about the addiction properties of marijuana, and he said something was really interesting in that when they founded the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic in the 70s, he said not one person came to them saying, please help me, I can't stop smoking pot. But he said in the late 1990s, they started to come. And by the mid-2000s, they have waiting lists of people who cannot stop smoking weed. And his explanation is that growers learn to crossbreed species of cannabis for several reasons. And he said they crossbreed species to have shorter growing seasons and to have a higher THC content. I don't know what the THC content is now. I think it's about 20 times higher than it was for the shake and stuff that people smoked in the 70s. And also to have plants shorter in stature so that they could grow more in a smaller space. I just felt like I needed to say that. Okay, so I work for the County Office of Education, and one of the things that school districts do when they do their prevention planning is they look at something called the California Healthy Kids Survey. This is a survey that's voluntary and anonymous, and it's given to students in grades 5, 7, 9, and 11 in all school districts that receive funding for safe and drug-free schools and communities. That's federal funding, and TUPE, that's Tobacco Use Prevention Education, that's state funding. They're mandated to give the California Healthy Kids Survey. So in our county, not all districts do the survey, only districts that accept the funding. But as the prevention coordinator, I get a compilation. I get a county level report every other year. And so I have some statistics that I just thought I would share with you. This survey asks lots of questions. It asks questions about their diet. It asks questions about do they feel safe at school. It asks questions about do they have adults that they feel like they have a caring relationship with. It asks questions about their alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. So I know that I have to be brief, so I'm just going to quote a few. So for this report is the last one I got, and I got it in the fall of 2007 because I get it every other year. And so it compiled all of the California Healthy Survey surveys in our county for 05, 06, and 06, 07. So remember, it's grades 5, 7, 9, 11, but I didn't bring any stats for the 5th graders, only the 7th, 9th, and 11th graders. By the way, there used to be a positive parent permission that was required for this survey. There still is for 5th graders, but not for grades 7, 9, and 11. Okay, so, I also want to say, far and away, alcohol is the drug of choice for the most popular drug of choice for our students, and that's true of the state of California and also nationally. But in terms of marijuana, we had in this report, this is lifetime use. So 7th graders, 11% of our 7th graders had smoked marijuana. 36% of our 9th graders had smoked marijuana in their lifetime, and 62% of the 11th graders had smoked marijuana. And then there's also a separate classification, and it's for continuation schools, and 79% of them were smoking. Okay. There's also a question that they ask students, and here's the question: how harmful do you think it is to use the following substances frequently, daily or almost daily? So 20% of our 9th graders thought it's mostly harmless to smoke marijuana. 21% of the 11th graders thought it's mostly harmless, and 44% of the continuation schools thought it's mostly harmless. In terms of accessibility, so the question that students were asked is, how difficult is it for students in your grade to get any of the following substances? Boy, I'm getting dry. So for marijuana, 26% of our 7th graders say it's very easy. to get marijuana. 64% of our ninth graders say it's very easy to get marijuana if they really want it, and 82% of the 11th graders. Very easy to get it. It's highly accessible here. One other thing I want to share is the California Department of Ed gives people such as Ralph and myself, they give us sheets with, they call them performance indicators, and they rank our school districts according to the results of the California Healthy Kids Survey. By the way, this is public information. If anybody wants to see the results of their local school district, you can go on West Ed's website. It's www.wested.org. Public information. But in terms of Willits Unified, in the 2005-2006 survey, their 7th graders ranked first in the state of California in terms of numbers of students who are smoking weed. That's first. Fort Bragg Unified, when they did their survey in 06-07, their 11th graders ranked 5th in the state of California in terms of marijuana use. And Ukiah ranked 7th with their 7th graders. So a lot of our kids are using, is what I'd like to say. And in terms of, I don't know where Hal is, but in terms of trends, I do get something that has trends that it's a multi-year comparison, and our stats are staying pretty much the same. I think the trend is just going to be the same. There's hardly any percentage point difference from 01, 03, and 05, and that's the last I have of it. So that's it for me.
Hi, my name is Karen Wandry. I'm the executive director of an organization called the Mendocino County Youth Project, which for the last 34 years has provided a variety of services for children and youth from ages 0 to 21 throughout the county. And a big part of what we've done has been alcohol and drug prevention work. Before I go any further, I want to give my thanks to our district attorney and to Ralph Cantor for their remarks, which basically was half of my original presentation. They made those points. And I want to thank them for that. I also wanted to say that if you're interested in hearing more about Ralph's ideas, on October 15th, a wonderful woman by the name of Linda Chamberlain, who's an expert on the adolescent brain, the effects of alcohol and drugs on adolescent brains, is coming to the county for a workshop. The morning will be for professionals and the evening will be for youth and their family members. And if you're interested, I'll hang around afterwards and I'll be able to give you a flyer if you want one. And she's just fantastic. Carol and I have heard her before and she's wonderful. Yeah. So I want to say that what I'm going to say today is really based on the experience of what I've heard from my own staff and the staff of people at AODP, from teachers, from people who work throughout the county with children and youth, and that's where I have my information from. I also want to say how made this references paper that I wrote. It's not published yet, but I am free to give it out in draft form, and it's basically about the challenges of doing prevention around marijuana abuse in a county which has the particular social norms that Mendocino County has around marijuana use. And if you're interested in getting a copy of that, come to me later and give me your email and I'll be glad to share that with you. I've interviewed a number of people who've worked around these issues in this county for years, including Carol, and so their feedback is there. I want to talk a little bit about some of the effects I've seen, which have already been mentioned by Meredith and Ralph. But basically, what we've seen in terms of children and youth here is a minimization of the harm, the concept of it's organic and natural, and a lack of understanding about the effects on the adolescent brain, that the adolescent brain is different from the adult brain. An inaccurate picture of use. While the statistics are extremely high in terms of use in our county, as Carol has shown, but there's also a significant number of young people who don't use or have maybe tried it and choose not to do it anymore. Because of that norm, the social norm supporting use in this county, what we've seen happen with young people is they get in trouble earlier and have a lot more trouble recognizing that they're in trouble. and asking for help, because the social norms are, hey, everybody does it, go ahead, smoke before school, it's fine. We've seen interesting things like resentment by those who don't grow, for example. There's lots of easy money that young people perceive to be available if you grow or you come from a growing family. But we also have seen the opposite of young people saying things like, gee, these young people who come from growing families after harvest, they come to school and they have a wonderful Hummer. And I babysit, and I'm struggling to buy clothes for school. The issue of not having friends at home is a real issue, particularly for younger people. And I think about that young person, that child who's at home in a growing family where almost every room is a grow house, and mom and dad have guns and thousands of dollars around and pounds of marijuana around, and about what it must be like sometimes to go to sleep at night, and worried about who's going to break into your home. And is something going to happen? And we see the reports in the paper all the time about the violence that's associated, and also people who aren't involved, who are innocent bystanders. So the fear of violence, I think also some of these young people, they see the big money and the need to contribute to the community doesn't occur to them. I say that because if people really had that spirit, I would expect that I could go to work and find anonymous donations of thousands of dollars in cash to help support our services. And AODP could find the same. Never happened. Never happened. I've never seen it happen. I'd love to see it happen. So if any of you are in the business and choose to do that, feel free to do it. I also agree with Ralph that the worst thing you can do with young people is be a hypocrite and not give them accurate information. You don't get anywhere with that. And so if you somehow, if youth are observing adults who are saying, hey, this is all about medical use, and yet they're clearly growing way in excess of most people's thoughts about what appropriate medical use is, they're going to see that hypocrisy. The other hand, if they also see people, adults saying to them, you know, anybody who smokes or uses or grows is a loser, they're also going to see that hypocrisy, because they know tons of people who smoke or use or grow who aren't losers, who are successful, and many people who are able to use recreationally and not get in trouble. So I just think it's important to have an honest dialogue about that. And I'm also glad that Meredith mentioned the issue about youth traveling outside the county and realizing the rest of the world may not be like Mendocino County and getting in trouble. I also want to talk a little bit about career options and life choices. One of the things that teachers and my workers say a lot is they have young people say, why should I bother to finish high school? I can make $25 an hour trimming bud. And we know that $25 an hour in our county is a good salary. So that's a challenge. And while I do believe there may be some medical justification for young people with attention deficit disorder based on what I've heard so far, that it may help their memory and their concentration. I think for most young people, marijuana, my generation, was certainly not known for its ability to help you remember things. And I don't believe that the current high-potency marijuana probably is different with that. So what happens? Your memory is so how do you get an education if you smoke a joint before going to school, during your lunch break, after school, before you go to bed, which is not uncommon from the stories that we hear from young people. How do you remember anything? Do you pass the exit exam? Even if you manage to get a diploma, if you want to go to college to learn something, and I'm certainly not saying everybody who smokes, you know, can't be successful. I know plenty of people who are straight A students and done well professionally and smoked, and sometimes even smoked heavy, but I'm saying that for some people, they can't. So what happens, though, if you look at us as a community and you think about the challenges of not getting an appropriate education either where you don't finish high school or you just finish but you're really not prepared to go on to any other kind of vocational training or college training. And then the other question around career and job work that I raise is, what if the profit motive was gone? What if something happened where it was either legalized or decriminalized in some way in which the big profit motives was gone? Where would you be? Do you really think people are going to pay $25 an hour for you to trim bud if the big profit motives are gone? I think it's going to be more like what you get paid to go harvest grapes in the wine industry. So what do you do then if that's what you're counting on as your future career?
Dr. Wandry, are you close to wrapping up?
I am very close to wrapping up.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Wagonette. So I also wanted to say that we do a variety of services, and I also want to thank the sheriff and the district attorney, because some of the asset forfeiture money you heard Meredith talk about does go to help support some of the services that we do. So what are the current trends if they continue? These are the things I'm concerned about: an undereducated workforce with limited skills and a lack of commitment to contribute to the community. I think we're already seeing this, families not wanting to move here because they don't want to bring up their kids here because of our reputation. And youth, I've had young people say to me, I came back here from college, I started to work here, decided I didn't want to stay because everybody in my age, or most of the people I know, are involved in growing, and I don't want to do that. So young people that we really need in the county moving away because they don't want to be part of that culture. I also think one of the effects is that we're probably going to learn even more about how to work around marijuana abuse issues in the particular climate of a county with social norms that support the use of marijuana. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jill Temkin, and I supervise adolescent treatment programs for Mendocino County, and we have programs in a variety of schools in a variety of areas in the county. And so I'm going to talk about what we see in the treatment programs and the intervention programs that we do. That's where my information comes from. And you've heard a lot of information already tonight, statistics, and people have talked a lot about the impact on the community and a lot about the loss of opportunities, the loss, you know, if young people get caught and arrested, the loss of freedom, loss of choices. So rather than me sitting here giving you more statistics, what I'd like to do is show you something that's it's a digital story that in our summer program a youth did in his own words with his own images to just describe his experience where he starts out using marijuana, and in this particular case he moves into using a lot of other drugs. And it is not the case that every single person that uses marijuana uses other drugs. However, most, I'd say 95% of the kids we see that do use other drugs started with marijuana. Pardon me? Yes. So hopefully this will work. So I think that story illustrates
able to use recreationally and not get in trouble. So I just think it's important to have an honest dialogue about that. And I'm also glad that Meredith mentioned the issue about youth traveling outside the county and realizing the rest of the world may not be like Mendocino County and getting in trouble. I also want to talk a little bit about career options and life choices. One of the things that teachers and my workers say a lot is they have young people say, why should I bother to finish high school? I can make $25 an hour trimming bud. And we know that $25 an hour in our county is a good salary. So that's a challenge. And while I do believe there may be some medical justification for young people with attention deficit disorder based on what I've heard so far, that it may help their memory and their concentration. I think for most young people, marijuana, my generation, was certainly not known for its ability to help you remember things. And I don't believe that the current high-potency marijuana probably is different with that. So what happens? Your memory is so how do you get an education if you smoke a joint before going to school, during your lunch break, after school, before you go to bed, which is not uncommon from the stories that we hear from young people. How do you remember anything? Do you pass the exit exam? Even if you manage to get a diploma, if you want to go to college to learn something, and I'm certainly not saying everybody who smokes, can't be successful. I know plenty of people who are straight A students and done well professionally and smoked, and sometimes even smoked heavy, but I'm saying that for some people, they can't. So what happens, though, if you look at us as a community and you think about the challenges of not getting an appropriate education either where you don't finish high school or you just finish but you're really not prepared to go on to any other kind of vocational training or college training. And then the other question around career and job work that I raise is, what if the profit motive was gone? What if something happened where it was either legalized or decriminalized in some way in which the big profit motives was gone? Where would you be? Do you really think people are going to pay $25 an hour for you to trim bud if the big profit motives are gone? I think it's going to be more like what you get paid to go harvest grapes in the wine industry. So what do you do then if that's what you're counting on as your future career?
Dr. Wandry, are you close to wrapping up?
I am very close to wrapping up.
Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Wagonette. I also wanted to say that we do a variety of services, and I also want to thank the sheriff and the district attorney because some of the asset forfeiture money you heard Meredith talk about does go to help support some of the services that we do. So what are the current trends? If they continue, these are the things I'm concerned about. An undereducated workforce with limited skills and a lack of commitment to contribute to the community. I think we've already seen this, families not wanting to move here because they don't want to bring up their kids here because of our reputation. And youth, I've had young people say to me, I came back here from college, I started to work here, decided I didn't want to stay because everybody in my age, or most of the people I know, are involved in growing, and I don't want to do that. So young people that we really need in the county moving away because they don't want to be part of that culture. I also think one of the effects is that we're probably going to learn even more about how to work around marijuana abuse issues in the particular climate of a county with social norms that support the use of marijuana. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jill Temkin, and I supervise adolescent treatment programs for Mendocino County, and we have programs in a variety of schools in a variety of areas in the county. And so I'm going to talk about what we see in the treatment programs and the intervention programs that we do. That's where my information comes from. And you've heard a lot of information already tonight, statistics, and people have talked a lot about the impact on the community and a lot about the loss of opportunities, the loss, if young people get caught and arrested, the loss of freedom, loss of choices. So rather than me sitting here giving you more statistics, what I'd like to do is show you something it's a digital story that in our summer program a youth did in his own words with his own images to just describe his experience where he starts out using marijuana, and in this particular case he moves into using a lot of other drugs. And it is not the case that every single person that uses marijuana uses other drugs. However, I'd say 95% of the kids we see that do use other drugs started with marijuana. Pardon me? Yes. So hopefully this will work. So I think that story illustrates